Does your Saab have a pretty big oil consumption issue, like losing over a liter per, well, every half a year or more? Depends on how much you drive your car, of course. Well, there could be many things doing this. First of all, look for leaks, but this car doesn't have any leaks from underneath. It looks pretty good. Actually, pretty good. The car itself is actually pretty straight and nice. Except one thing, it uses oil, a lot of it. And this is, you can see, this is the newer generation engine. You can see the silver, or it's actually a very weird engine because it uses the old crankcase ventilation that has the silver top. I don't know what it is. I don't know what year this is. Anyways, this has a massive oil consumption problem and it doesn't leak. And normally when just idling, it isn't smoking. It is not smoking at all. But when you give it gas, it starts to smoke. Especially if it has been driving very nicely for a while and then you just floor it and then just have the turbo do everything. Well, if you look at this, there's a lot of oil on the bypass valve tubing going into the intake. And what happens is that happens due to, well, that's two things I'm doing here. Oil here is two things. So a bad gasket on this, that's one thing. Another thing, it shouldn't be oil here at all. And what happens is when the turbo starts to break down and it starts leaking oil on the compressor side, this side of the turbo, it spews oil into the intercooler, and that will remain in the intercooler and partially be picked up when you give it gas, floor it or whatever. Or even if it's a very cold winter morning, it will spool up the turbo because it retards the timing to heat up the cats. And also picks it up then. And it will be shut out the blow-off valve or bypass valve down there. And over time you will get that residue. This engine has so little oil now, if you just brake normally on the road, the oil light comes on, which means it's it's way too low. Another thing is it also valve ticks, and the valve ticking from these engines are two things. Well, it's only one thing: bad oil pressure. Valve ticking in these engines, they are hydraulic lifters. They shouldn't valve tick, like under normal circumstances. So this is not my car. It's a friend of mine's car or a colleague's car. Doing a tire change on it because it's near winter here. It's running summer tires, and I noticed that the oil light came on while driving, and not everybody knows that oil light, but I know that oil light because I've had a car with low oil pressure, and that's a scary light to see. So this probably just needs a fill of oil. Last time I had this car in, I knew it was bad low oil then as well, so I replaced the oil and filter. Can't really see the filter, I believe it's down there somewhere. And this is now half a year ago, and now it's dull oil again. And I use correct oil as well, 5W40 on these engines, because I use 5W40 when the engines starting to get a bit older. So yep, probably just gonna fill up a liter of oil on it, because that's way more than it has now. And I work with this guy, so I'll probably go over his car quicker or more often, but I'll be definitely warning about the turbo. So can get the new turbo pretty cheaply on these cars, so no problems at all. I know someone who sells one, and I got a couple of them myself. So, but those are used. So the friend of mine that sells one has a new one. The thing is, this turbo also looks pretty shiny, which could be just that this engine has been taken really good care of. This generally, hasn't done much, 236,000 kilometers. But I don't know. Could be it doesn't have much rust either, so probably just not much salt. So yeah, refilling this oil on this thing and changing those tires, and hopefully this car will run for years to come, hopefully. But yeah, check for that. If your car uses your oil, if it leaks here or if it sweats here, it's more than likely a blown turbo, or it could be born rings, but most likely turbo. This here is a good example of how the Saab engine shouldn't sound like. I filled oil now. It used some time to fill up the hydraulic lifters after that, but you can clearly hear the turbo though. So you can hear it. And let's say in reverse. I'm gonna brake, or I'm gonna actually simply drive. I'm gonna brake boost it. Let's try to listen for it, see? This slight humming. A slight humming from the turbo. That's your turbo. It's that woo sound should be like that. Should be a more of a high-pitched noise, and more like a hissing more than anything else. If you're actually gonna hear the turbo at all, this thing is completely stock, so it doesn't have any open air filter or anything. So, yeah.